For more than 100 years, WRJ has been dedicated to strengthening the voice of women and advocating for women's rights. So I am deeply honored to introduce to you this morning Congresswoman Gwen Moore of Wisconsin, who throughout her career as a public servant has also made empowering women her touchstone. Since her election in 2004, Congresswoman Moore has become a leader on issues ranging from health insurance reform to women's health, from maternal and infant mortality to ending domestic violence. She led the charge to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act and has been an outspoken opponent of efforts to limit women's reproductive care and reproductive freedom. She has also served as the Democratic co-chair of the Congressional Women's Caucus. Representative Moore's tireless work of standing with those who are struggling is rooted in her own experiences. As a single, expectant mother, she completed her college education with the help of the federal TRIO programs, which are designed to support students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Representative Moore is a not-so-secret agent for women's rights and equality in Congress and across the country. She models for each of us how to be compassionate, strong advocates for those whose voices are too often unheard. I met Representative Moore just a few moments ago in the green room. She immediately threw her arms around me to say hello. Gives you an idea of what kind of person Representative Moore is. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Gwen Moore.
Wow, Rabbi. After that auspicious introduction, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. I mean, consultation on conscience. I mean, that is a very ambitious conference, and I think I'm going to steal that. Because this is a consultation that needs to occur several times a day. And I am going to really suggest to many of my colleagues that they adopt this as a daily ritual, a consultation on conscience. You know, rooted in the Jewish tradition is a really radical concept that all of God's children are created in the image of God. I mean, just imagine that. We're all created in the image of God. That's not reformed, y'all. That's radical. I mean, the color of our skin, our racial background, our nationality, and certainly our gender or gender identity makes us equal in the sight of God. This Jewish faith nugget really reinforces any kind of civil or constitutional notion of the fundamental rights of others. And it provides each one of us with an individual mandate and duty to God to carry out that notion. But unfortunately, people just sort of ignore this particular mandate. It just seems that even before the women's suffrage movement in this country, women have continued to struggle to find that equality and that parity, whether it's the fight for equal pay, whether it's the right to be promoted when a woman is deserving of that. And certainly it is felt most distinctly in the interference with women's reproductive freedom. Thank God for menopause, y'all. Honestly, it is really frustrating to open every session in Congress. H.R. 1, first bill, always has something to do with controlling a woman's womb. I mean, seriously, think about it. H.R. 1 always deals with women's reproductive freedom, and it really harkens and speaks to the effort on the part of a small minority of folks to keep things the way they used to be and to keep power and control in the hands of men. And when I was the co-chair of the Women's Caucus and had an opportunity to meet women from all over the world, one of the things that became a part of my consciousness was to recognize that many of the security threats that we're seeing all over the world are due to the oppression of women. That if you want to know whether or not a country is a security risk, look at the status of women. Women are the canary in the coal mine. And to the extent that we don't take care of women and women's needs, that country, and certainly our country, is in trouble. There are those in Congress and in our state legislatures that are ready to take us back to the good old days. I mean, think about some of the very specific laws that where there is a major effort to ossify these things in stone. I mean, requiring doctors to perform tests and procedures that doctors have deemed medically unnecessary, the transvaginal probes, preventing doctors from prescribing and dispensing medication that's medically appropriate. I mean, stopping women from having birth control, for God's sake. I mean, we can have a fair debate about abortion, but birth control? I thought we had kind of agreed that birth control was preventive. I mean, I don't know about you men in here, but you women know that for 30 to 35 years of your life, you could get pregnant every month. I mean, that's kind of daunting. My mom had 9 kids, but my God, her reproductive life was longer than that. And, you know, these restrictions are an affront to women's freedom. And that's why I'm really proud to have co-sponsored the Women's Health Protection Act. It's a bill designed to protect a woman's right to a safe and legal abortion by stopping all these restrictive laws. And for those who don't believe it, abortion has been a part of human culture since the beginning of time. And for those people who don't believe, we do not want to see another era where women show up after the coat hanger and homemade abortions to which they've been subjected. We don't want to go back there. And I applaud the reform movement for passing strong policy in favor of reproductive justice, because that's what it is. Because that choice has got to be between a family, a doctor, and should not include politicians. You know, I often tell the story of my first sort of conscience, you know, my very first consultation of conscience about abortion. I was 12 years old and overheard my mom on the telephone talking about a woman who was pregnant with her 11th or 12th child. And hearing my mother saying that they would offer her a therapeutic abortion. Like, this is like 1963, long before Roe v. Wade. But that the woman wasn't going to take it. She just believed that the Lord would provide, and the Lord does provide. I agree with that. But when she died, when the baby was 2 weeks old, I had to ask myself the question, is this what God wanted? Did God want her to orphan 12 kids? Did God want her to die? That was my first sense of consciousness about this. And the bitter and ugly irony about all those people who are opposed to abortion is that they have, on a bipartisan basis, I know you're a nonpartisan group, so I'm saying something that's offensive to Democrats and Republicans. Let me tell you, on a bipartisan basis, they decided to end the safety net for babies and children, continuing to erode that, and subjecting little bitty children to the counter-cyclical forces of our economy. That if your parents can't find a job, then baby boy, junior, you just cannot eat. Now, reproductive freedom and the shredding of the safety net are just a couple of issues that are of concern to me. Right now, women, Maria Shriver did a study and found that literally most households are dependent upon women's income, either as a sole source or the family would not be able to make it without the woman's income. You know, a woman's income is no longer this thing that a woman does so she can have extra money to shop. It is vital to the household. But of course, women work hard and they're paid less for the same work. You've heard those data where women earn 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes, that it's worse for women of color, that African Americans earn only 64 cents and Latinas 56 cents. And of course, the detractors say, well, that's because of choices that women make. That's because men do more arduous work than women do. Well, ask Lily Ledbetter about that. Ask her. We are still finding that women are paid less to do the same work. And it is so hard to enforce that it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to shine a light in those institutions that we have access to make sure it doesn't happen on our watch, because it's just too easy to do. I am happy to report that Democrats and Republicans have found common ground on some issues. That's why I am really honored to join a bipartisan group led by Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who recently introduced legislation designed to help rape survivors maintain full custody over their children. Thank you so much. This is a problem. It is not legislation seeking a problem. This legislation has come about from very serious lawsuits that rapists have had the audacity to sue for custody of their children. And this legislation would provide grants, federal grants, to states under the Violence Against Women Act to make sure that we can help defend the right of these mothers to maintain custody of their children. And speaking of the Violence Against Women Act, another bipartisan effort, it was like, just let me put it this way, it was difficult. But with bipartisan support, both sides squeezing against the middle, we were able to update the Violence Against Women Act to include protections for LGBT women, Native American women, and undocumented immigrant women. The debate was ludicrous as to why we couldn't update it. And so I stood on the floor and talked about the various women who would be included in these protections. And I talked about lesbians who've been raped or beaten, immigrant women who are being held hostage by their stative, Native American women, where men would actually drag women onto the reservation, knowing that there would be no authority that could punish them with their crime. Minors used in the sex trade industry. And I asked them the same thing that Sojourner Truth asked. Ain't they women? Don't they deserve those protections? And I was so pleased that on March 13th, March 7th, 2013, President Obama signed the Reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. I consider it a major accomplishment. It is so wonderful to have RAC as allies in these struggles that women face with their children, with their reproductive health. But as an African American woman, I am particularly excited to be here and to really form and congeal this relationship with you. Because you have had a long history of fighting intolerance wherever it existed, not just anti-Semitism and religious persecution, as you all well know where that's taken you, but you have been able to see the seeds of intolerance everywhere, and that is inured to the benefit of African Americans in this country. Let me take this time to thank you. This voice has been vital in key social justice issues throughout history, everything from the abolitionist movement to desegregation, civil rights, and now is not a time to be quiet. You know, I met Rabbi Pessner in Selma. It was love at first sight, y'all. So I want to thank you for all the important work you do. Thank you for your commitment to social justice. Tikkun Olam. Thank you again. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm on the hot spot now. I'm ready to take a couple of good questions or comments or...
Some way or other. But what, as Jews, can we do to work on the mass incarceration problem?
Let me tell you this. I am so glad you asked that question. They told me to talk about women's rights, but let me tell you, I have 2 sons and a daughter, and I've been walking around for years saying, Gwen, how stupid could you have been to bring 2, not 1, so arrogant to have brought 2 African-American men into the world when you live in America. And you know that they're going to be subject to this. I think it's extremely important for people other than African Americans to speak out against this and to really, really demonstrate that this is all about creating jobs. I mean, as you well know, crime, even at a point in time when crime was being reduced in our country, our expenditures on incarceration quadrupled. That we just incarcerate, and I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Wisconsin has the highest incarceration rate of African American men in the world. Oh, right in Wisconsin. That's why I said, how stupid could you be to give birth to 2 of them? What we have got to do is that we have got to, and I live in a community, I'll give you an example. In Wisconsin, if you get caught with marijuana, and I mean just a cigarette of marijuana, a joint of marijuana, if you live anywhere in Wisconsin, this is a municipal fine ticket. You get caught with marijuana in Milwaukee, that's a state charge. You know, and so these are the kinds of things that we've got to fix. I think we have rewarded politicians year after year about being tough on crime. And so politicians think that in order to get elected, they got to have a plank in their platform that says, I'm going to arrest everybody. And we've got to let politicians in our various jurisdictions know, no. You know, when you start talking about reducing the deficit and reducing federal government expenditures, here's a place that we want to do it at. There are low-level offenders that don't deserve incarceration, that these assets can be better used in the community, with community corrections. There are victimless crimes, and no, we're not going to provide folks who live in rural areas an alternative to their economy drying up by building another prison and spending $35,000 a year to incarcerate someone when we could spend that $35,000 a year sending somebody to Yale. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because, you know, when we look at the politics today, whether it's the state of Wisconsin, which is destroying its University of Wisconsin, I mean, we have one of the most brilliant systems in America, public school systems being destroyed, you know, by taking assets out of our educational system. What sense does it make to put that into a prison industry that doesn't deliver any dividends? Thank you so much for that question. Yes, ma'am.
On this same theme, can Congress do anything also to, one, stop the militarization of the police, and second, I think if you had fewer police trying to monitor every community, then there would be fewer mass arrests and the school-to-prison pipeline.
Well, let me tell you, as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, one of our major initiatives right now, other than getting the Voting Rights Act reauthorized, which is a major theme this year, we need your help on that, is to look at police brutality, as it were. I think everybody sort of agrees that we need police assets. And I think that we have got to go straight in and look at the training. You know, when police officers have within their training this notion that sort of any resistance to arrest, I mean, I didn't realize this until we have had numbers of deaths where police have said, you don't really have a right to resist arrest, whether it's justified or not. So if you go in the notion in any amount of resistance, you know, you grab, you know, you do a defensive move. Somebody's hitting you with a baton, so you just instinctively grab the baton, that will get you killed. That's what happened to Dontre Hamilton in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know, oh, he took my baton for him. I've had enough beatings from my mother to know that you automatically grab the strap or the switch. You know, and so we have got to have within that training some obligation, which doesn't exist now, on the part of the police to spare life if possible. You know, if somebody's 10 feet away from you, you're not in danger. You can't say, I was afraid for my life, as we have seen. You know, someone's running away. We have got to have within their training some notion or some sense we ought to have some affirmative, they ought to be able to have to provide some affirmative proof that they tried to spare life, that they really did have no other option. So my good friend Jan Schakowsky, she's my best friend. There she is. Try not to go to sleep while she talks, y'all. She's a firebrand, and she's my best friend in Congress. I love her dearly. Thank you so much for this privilege.